How could you kill someone you love?
Some say you're not a real killer till you do.
Tell me! I'm not playing, Marshall.
Look at you. You can't either. We brothers. Can't do that.
Now, we went into episode 9 with the heartbreaking death of JP. We expected to see more heartbreak, pain, hurt, and also anger, but Gary Lennon did warn us prior to season 3 that the penultimate episode was going to be a heartbreaker, and they did also tease the bloodiest season ever. But holy shit, episode 9 found a way to just turn it up a notch yet again, with not just Marshall's death, but also Diamond. Diamond is now gone, which will no doubt lead to big retaliation because it is a big kill. The head of the CBI has fallen, so Jenard will definitely be out for revenge in episode 10. But this episode was action-packed from not just Diamond's death. We also saw D-Mac killing his brother in Marshall, which really was a shock. I did think Marshall would die in episode 9, but not at the hands of D-Mac. But as they said once back in Power, you ain't a killer till you kill someone you love. With law enforcement, Bobby DeFranco has finally uncovered AUSA Seng is the one who was compromised. Vic had the perfect chance to escape, but I think we all know he didn't, and he's definitely out of here in episode 10. We also saw Kate return to Chicago, who uncovered Maria's pregnant, but also how she was planning to leave to go to Mexico. So after episode 9, it really is finally poised for the main event in episode 10. An all-out war which will no doubt follow on from the funeral, and it could also be Tommy calling in a favour, which is Tariq St. Patrick, crossing over into the world of Chicago and Force. But as always, stick with this video right through to the very end. We're going to be running through all the major conversations and talking points for an action-packed Power Book 4 Force Season 3, Episode 9. Now, this episode kicks off with Tommy and D-Mac outside JP's house, with Tommy making arrangements for JP's funeral. We all know what went down towards the end of episode 8. It was an absolute bloodbath from Jenard killing JP, Jojo, and also King Kilo. Of course, Tommy just wanted the best for JP. You also had D-Mac in the background, who in that moment was just kind of lost for words. He didn't even know what to say in that moment in time, which definitely is normal. What we saw from D-Mac in episode 9 was raw human emotion, which is something Lucien Cambric did tease in the build-up to episode 9. Now, with Shanti, something that I've been questioning over the past week was whether we could actually trust Shanti Showstopper in this new partnership / coalition that they formed towards the end of episode 8, which was no doubt a valid question to be asking because Tommy had the exact same thought. He was questioning whether Shanti was hiding Jenard and whether she was protecting him, but her response was she was all about business, which again is another reason why Tommy looked at her and thought, I don't fully trust you. Gary Lennon did tease prior to season 3 that she doesn't fill the Liliana void, which is someone who Tommy could trust, but with Shanti, she's all about servicing herself. She will always make business moves that benefit herself. Luckily for Tommy, that was for him in episode 9, because she knows that Jenard and CBI are a lost cause at this moment in time, especially with Jenard back to being high as a kite, Double J, and also Double D. We then had Miguel walk in and mention he's got word on Roberto Ortega's location, and they needed to make a move, because let's not forget, the Marquez cartel did also make a move on Maria in episode 8 as well. So they still also had to deal with the issue of Roberto Ortega. Tommy wanted revenge on Jenard for JP, and then you wanted Miguel, who wanted to target the Marquez cartel. But also reminding Tommy at the same time that they needed to put the living before the dead. At the same time, he did understand Tommy's pain because not too long ago he also lost a loved one as well in his grandmother. That was back in season 2. They've definitely been through their things over seasons 2 and 3, but they do also now have a lot in common. There's Maria and the baby, there's also the issue with the Marquez cartel, but also the fact that they're very big on protecting family and loved ones. And that's why they're so similar in that particular respect. Prior to season 3, Tommy did think the complete opposite because he didn't know what Miguel was capable of when he took Maria. But now you have Miguel who's willing to ride with Tommy, just like we saw multiple times throughout episode 9 and also in 10. Now, picking up with CBI, back in episode 7, Jenard did warn Diamond not to sleep with Madame Boo, but what did we have here in episode 9? Diamond doing exactly that. You never mix business with pleasure, which is something Diamond warned Tommy against way back in season 2. We have been saying that Diamond is a big hypocrite. Tommy hasn't been honest himself and he has made moves behind Diamond's back as well, treating him more like a number 2. But no doubt Diamond is a big hypocrite at the same time. Now, we also had Jenard telling Diamond that a whole lot of shit went down with King Kilo, Jojo, and Tommy's brother. All of them are now dead. He gave them the story of what went down and how JP wasn't the intended target, D-Mac was, but Tommy's brother just ended up being collateral damage. You also had no choice but to take out King Kilo as well, because he made it crystal clear that him and Diamond had been playing games, and they were out of the coalition. Now, this was a huge mess because Diamond knew that Tommy would come at them like the Terminator. He knows what Tommy's like. So the plan that they put into motion was to set the RDs on Tommy, as well as flipping over to working for the Marquez cartel. Because they also knew Che wouldn't give them the green light to go after Tommy, but maybe the Marquez cartel would. Which, in my opinion, was way too much change for their organization in such a short period of time. And that's why their empire is now crumbling. Neither Jenard or Diamond are thinking straight at this moment in time, like Shanti was. She wasn't someone who was allowing emotion to cloud her judgment, but both Jenard and Diamond were, as well as being high and drunk at the same time. Double J and Double D. Now we then had Grayskull of the RDs confronting Jenard and Diamond about King Kilo and Jojo's death, because the math is pretty simple. Jenard came over to see King Kilo at the end of episode 8, he told him that he had D-Mac's location and they were left together, but Jenard is the only one who's alive. I did mention prior to episode 9 that it would sound hella sus in my opinion, and Grayskull was questioning the exact same thing. However, Jenard does what he always does, he puts the blame on Tommy and also D-Mac. He said that ever since Tommy got to Chicago, there's been bodies dropping in the streets. Chavo earlier on in season 3 with the DSDs, it's just been bodies ever since Tommy got into town. Now Jenard and Diamond thought, let the RDs deal with Tommy, and as a peace offering, they'll deal with D-Mac, because Grayskull still wanted D-Mac dead as well. So after the conversation with Grayskull, Jenard turned to Marshall and told him that he needs to kill D-Mac, which is something we spoke about earlier this week as well, because you could sense the tension brewing between Marshall and D-Mac. They were building up to another big moment after their fallout in episode 8. Marshall chose CBI and D-Mac chose to side with his uncle Tommy. From that moment on, once Jenard did what he did towards the end of episode 8 by killing JP, it was always going to put Marshall in a very sticky situation. Because at the end of the day, D-Mac is still his boy, they're still brothers. Despite what they've been through and despite their falling out in episode 8, Marshall even said it in this conversation that it is his brother. Brothers fight, just like we've seen Ghost and Tommy fight, just like we've seen Tariq and Brayden fight back in Power Book 2 Ghost. Same thing here. But Jenard wanted Marshall to be the one to take out D-Mac because he's the only one who could get close enough to him to get it done at this moment in time, which Marshall felt very uncomfortable with, and you could tell he didn't want to do it. Now it does also have to be said, in the background you also had Diamond just watching and listening while Jenard was asking Marshall to kill his brother in D-Mac. No doubt what was swirling through his mind at that moment in time was the seed of doubt that Shanti planted towards the end of episode 8. Jenard hasn't stopped planning to kill him ever since he got back into CBI. You then have Jenard here trying to convince Marshall to kill his brother. What do you guys think Diamond would have been thinking? It was a very clever seed that Shanti planted, an intentional one. But with Marshall, he did tell Jenard he is CBI, but you could tell he was very hesitant to kill D-Mac, and I did think we all knew what was going to happen from here, just not the way it played out with D-Mac being the one to kill Marshall. Now let's just take a break from everything that was going on in the streets because the episode was quite intense. Let's talk about where we were with law enforcement, which has also been another hot topic of discussion of mine pretty much every week because this is a huge part of Power Book 4 Force. AUSA saying the death of Stacey Marks, Bobby DeFranco, and we also now have the addition of Trina Delgado. She mentions that Ortega was released this morning. That was of course thanks to AUSA Seng, who is now the acting US attorney at this moment in time. He'd promised Shen that he'd get it done, and that's exactly what he did. Now she's only just recently come onto the team, so she's been getting up to speed with all the evidence and all the surveillance footage, and she did actually mention that the lawyer who met with Merkovich back in episode 1, Shen, he doesn't exist. She thought if the Marquez cartel killed Merkovich and Claudia in episode 5, then maybe the Marquez had something to do with Stacey's death, which Bobby DeFranco knew wasn't true. He knew it wasn't a cartel hit from the tone of his voice, his anger, the pain when he came face to face with Tommy in episode 8. He knows for a fact that it was Tommy Egan. At this moment in time, he just can't prove it. Now with Vic, he was doing what he does best, being Vic the snitch. We had him in an interrogation room with the AUSA Seng, who was putting all the pieces of the puzzle together of Tommy blackmailing Stacey Marks, and when she stopped cooperating and working for Tommy, he then took her out. Now we know what AUSA Seng's game is here. Earlier this week we unpacked the topic of law enforcement. We spoke about how AUSA Seng would benefit from throwing dirt on Stacey Marks' name, and that's exactly what he wanted Vic to do here. He wanted Vic to talk more about the blackmail, and if not, the office would look at him instead for Stacey Marks' murder, which is where Ray came in. Back in episode 8, she mentioned that she was happy to be an alibi for Vic. They also no longer had the witness to testify against Vic killing Colin back in season 1. That was thanks to Tommy's moves back in episode 5, which at the time I did say inadvertently did help Vic because they no longer had the witness to Colin's murder. But the more AUSA Seng pushed Vic, the more he started to realize, oh shit, you're on someone else's payroll too. And we all know how this game works with leverage. Leverage is power, and it does shift from player to player during a season of power, and that's exactly what happened in this particular room. So Vic did mention that he will give him a statement of exactly what he wants Tommy kill Stacy as long as he gets to walk free, because there's no way AUSA Seng would also allow Bobby DeFranco to have a crack at Vic Flynn, knowing that he could have also been exposed. We did then later see Vic and Ray on a private jet saying goodbye to Chicago, but this gave me Dre vibes from Back in Power. Even before I saw the trailer for episode 10, I just knew that Vic wouldn't leave this alone, just like Dre couldn't leave Ghost. So he will be back in episode 10. We all know what he wants is to be fully free from Tommy, just like Dre wanted to be fully free from Ghost. But I do think we all know what happens in episode 10 when it comes to Vic the Snitch. Now, Bobby DeFranco was here questioning AUSA Seng on Vic, Tommy, and also Stacey Marks. AUSA Seng mentioned even though they do believe it is Tommy that did get to Stacey, along with Vic's statement that gives him motive, they still didn't have enough to arrest him. They needed to build a solid case. The problem with Bobby DeFranco at this moment in time, just like we spoke about with Tommy and especially D-Mac, at this moment in time he's full of pain, hurt, anger, raw human emotion. Just like D-Mac lost JP, at the end of the day Stacey Marks was still Bobby DeFranco's wife as well. So you can understand why he wanted justice. However, Trina Delgado did warn him if he does go after Tommy, then she'll leave him with no choice but to arrest Bobby DeFranco, and he's probably best to actually investigate Shen. Rule him out as a suspect. If you start ruling out players for Stacey Marks' murder and only leave Tommy Egan, that's the way to get this done. So that's exactly what we saw from Bobby DeFranco a bit later on in the episode. He was watching Chen from far, and then all of a sudden, just as he was about to leave, in comes AUSA Seng, who took a big envelope for his help in releasing Roberto Ortega, which was all caught on video, or maybe Bobby DeFranco took some pictures. Either way, he's rumbled AUSA Seng, and now the entire house of cards is about to fall when it comes to law enforcement. Will Bobby DeFranco maybe even think AUSA Seng had something to do with Stacey Marks' murder? Does he get named as a suspect? Does Bobby DeFranco still think it's Tommy? It is going to be very interesting to see how this now unfolds, now that AUSA Seng has been rumbled. Now, back on the streets, we had Tommy rolling up on some of the members of CBI, trying to get them to flip, although Smurf wouldn't, which I think we knew anyway, because we did see him by Jannard's side in one of the scenes for the funeral in one of the previous teasers. Now on the pancake, Tommy killed him and told Smurf, deliver this message that he's coming for Jannard. Now with the two brothers, we then had them coming to see the Marquez cartel. Earlier in episode 9, they did mention that the Marquez cartel are also after Tommy, and they knew Che would have given them the green light for a war. So flip over to the Marquez cartel. Now there was a bit of tension here because of what happened back in episode 3. Tommy retaliated to the Marquez killing Chavo and the DSDs by killing Roberto Ortega's uncle. And that's not something that's been forgotten by Ortega, who mentioned that they'll just take Jannard instead. That sounded like a fair trade. However, Diamond said that move was from Tommy, not CBI, which is where he offered to leave the Estrada cartel and bring them an entire coalition. They wanted a foothold in Chicago. Well, here it was. It did, however, come with one condition. They wanted CBI to leave Tommy to be Ortega's kill. Now Miguel actually had eyes on CBI at that moment in time. He rang Tommy to give him the heads up that CBI were in a meeting with Roberto Ortega, which is when we saw Tommy almost lit up by C4 and some of the RDs, but watching them was also Che. He had both Tommy and Miguel kidnapped, who wasn't happy at the fact that they were going to war with the Marquez cartel when he did warn both. He didn't want any problems in the streets. But this isn't anything new for Tommy. It's kind of a deja vu moment to when he was kidnapped back in Power by Felipe Lobos. He's definitely used to this type of stuff. He also then told Che CBI have flipped on Che to the Marquez cartel, and they were also dealing fentanyl. Che was about to lose an entire city to the Marquez cartel, so as far as they were concerned, they had the wrong two people in those two chairs. It actually benefits Che if Tommy and Miguel dealt with CBI and the Marquez cartel for the Estrada cartel, but he did give Tommy another stern warning. The next time he will kill Maria, and Miguel also stays back, which was definitely a big problem. Tommy definitely needed Miguel in this episode, no doubt, but at the same time, D-Mac needed him too, his family needed him after JP's death, Maria needed him, and he also had to pay Che, because he did promise him back in episode 8 he would re-up within 24 hours. Tommy was definitely being pulled in 1,000,001 different directions in this particular episode, and you could tell the pressure really was building on all fronts. And the last thing he actually wanted at this moment in time was to see his mom, Kay Egan. She was back in Chicago after Maria made the call, after she heard the news about JP's death, stopped bottling up his feelings because she knows Tommy better than anyone. We did see a really emotional Tommy when he killed Tony Teresi back in Power. She was devastated as well, and she just wanted to help. And no doubt Tommy did actually need help in this episode on all fronts. From his family, from D-Mac, from Miguel, from Shanti, from everyone. Being a lone wolf only gets you so far. As I mentioned, Shanti was also a great help in episode 9, And for all the questions that we had for her earlier this week around whether Tommy could trust Shanti, it is so far so good. She came to drop off the money to Che. There was no funny business in her trying to backstab Tommy, yet it does have to be said that could still very well be a possibility in episode 10. But she was able to hold her own and also free Miguel at the same time, because Tommy definitely did need Miguel by his side. Now, when Tommy came back to JP's, DMAC was missing, which was another problem for Tommy that he didn't need at this moment in time. They were at war with the CBI and the Marquez cartel, and the last thing he needed was for DMAC to be wandering the streets, looking for revenge on his own. But he did actually come to see Marshall, who was sat with his gun, just thinking. We know he didn't want to kill DMAC, and one of the first things that he said was, he needs to get out of town. They also had a conversation around how they'd been boys since they were 6, and that's why Marshall couldn't kill him. He loves him like a brother, but at the same time, he is with CBI. Now, this is where DMAC pulled his gun on Marshall when he wouldn't give up Jenard, because he wasn't playing games at this moment in time in episode 9. He wanted Jenard, and I did mention prior to episode 9, based on the interviews that they'd been doing, that Tommy and DMAC would run through anybody who stood in their way. But honestly, I did not expect DMAC to be the one to kill Marshall. We did expect him to die in episode 9, that was one of our death predictions, but not at the hands of DMAC, not at the hands of his own brother. But just like Kanan once said back in Power, you're not a real killer until you kill someone you love. Well, it looks like DMAC is now a real killer. At the same time, you could see he was all over the place, still full of so much emotion. Now, with the RDs, they did come and question the death of their own. They weren't happy, which is where Diamond said they needed to back off Tommy for now, because they were now in business with the Marquez cartel, and he'll go and speak to him. So we then had Tommy come and see Diamond, and we all know the history between these two. We had Diamond questioning how did they end up here, having this particular conversation, which I do think we can answer in a number of different ways. Things were really going well with their business and organization. They built a really good business relationship at first anyway. They had a good thing going on with their business under Che. They were one step away from being the only connect in Chicago as well. And that would have been very possible if Tommy didn't throw Miguel a lifeline. Tommy even mentioned they could still take over the city, which is something I disagree with. Yes, there is a lot of territory in Chicago and they can come to a mutual agreement, but I just think way too much damage has been done with JP's death. The bridge has been burned, the matchstick has been lit, and way too many moves have been made behind each other's backs for them to ever work together again. The partnership between Tommy and Diamond didn't work because it was never a partnership. Tommy was always behaving like Ghost, always treating Diamond like a number 2. There was a lack of trust, and when there's no trust, especially in a game like this, it just simply is destined to fail. Both are no doubt definitely to blame, both have made moves behind each other's backs and kept secrets, but for majority of the time, Tommy's moves have always leveled CBI up. Whereas Diamond, especially as of late, this move was Diamond's ego. Sleeping with Madame Wu, he's been very reckless. But it was also Jenard in Diamond's ear as well, and that's the second reason, and in my opinion, the main reason why they were here. Tommy wanted Diamond to give up Jenard killed JP, so Tommy now wants Diamond to serve up his brother, a brother for a brother, which definitely does sound like another fair trade, but we knew Diamond would never give him up, which is where Tommy left him with a stern warning, because this conversation was just a formality. Tommy was just giving Diamond an opportunity to end things peacefully in a fair trade, because you could tell there was still a bit of respect here between the two, there definitely was. At the same time, it was just formality of Tommy basically telling Diamond that he is going to cancel Christmas for Junkie Jenard. That was Tommy's message. Now we then had the news of Marshall's death filtering through from Bones to Jenard, with Raheem listening to everything, and we did mention he would play a key role going forward. He warned Jenard that he was high and they needed to lay low. But Jenard being Jenard, he wanted to go after Tommy, but instead, he found Kate. Now, on Kate Egan, just before we come to Jenard finding Kate, there was another great nod to Ghost, James St. Patrick. Kate said that she couldn't believe that she was burying yet another son, the first time being Ghost, because he was also like a son to her as well. Something I'm sure we're going to see a lot of in Power Origins, although she wasn't actually at Ghost's funeral back in Power Book 2 Ghost. But anyway, this was also where she found out Maria was pregnant. A really happy moment when things were really dark for him at this moment in time from JP's death, a sign of some light, a blessing, and a rare sign of hope in the world of Power. Or is it? Because I do think what happened next played a role in Maria trying to leave for Mexico. Jenard went straight for Kate, and honestly I did fear the worst for a moment, because you just never know with Jenard in this junkie state at this moment in time, this double J state. But I did remember Kate would be at the funeral, and luckily she did survive. And that was the cue for Tommy to move them over to Miguel Garcia's over at Little Village, because he knows that they'll be safe over there. Just like we mentioned before, I do think Tommy has started to realize Miguel Garcia is just like him in terms of protecting his family. Now, Kate did also later on catch Maria trying to book a one-way ticket to Mexico. We do need to keep that in mind going into episode 10. She's probably looking at all this chaos and thinking, she honestly can't live like this. She honestly can't live like this looking over her shoulder. So we definitely need to keep this in mind going into episode 10. But over to the big battle between CBI, Tommy, Miguel, and DMAC. Now, we did have Shanti mention that she's got an inside man within CBI, which was news to Tommy, because that used to be his organization. He was very surprised, and again, comes back to the element that we spoke about before, trust. Can you really say for 100% certain that Shanti is trustworthy? Definitely not. But Raheem was about to come in clutch in episode 9 because they had to think smart, think strategic. DMAC was all over the place at this moment in time, again, full of emotion, wanting to hit back, which is understandable, but that's when you make mistakes. That's how you get yourself killed. Shanti was the only one who was thinking with her head at this moment in time. She was thinking smart because she wasn't actually emotionally attached to the situation like Tommy, DMAC, or Miguel were. She knew Jenard and Diamond would be relocating after Jenard went after Kate, which is exactly what we saw them do. They relocated themselves to the church, they had the perimeter sealed and the location locked off, so they thought. And if Tommy did come for them, then they'd know they'd have a snitch within their ranks, which they definitely did. It was Raheem. And this was it. Shanti let Tommy know that they had CBI's location, Tommy was ready, Miguel was ready, and so was DMAC. We even had Kate telling Tommy, make them suffer. Now, if it wasn't already obvious which brother would die in this situation and in this battle, then this conversation should have definitely given you the hint. Diamond opened up to Jenard and told him when he went down for 15 years, there was a part of him that didn't believe that he could continue to do it. That's where Tommy came in. But to choose Tommy, an outsider over his family, he knew he made a mistake and he apologized to Jenard, which is where I think Diamond was giving Jenard an opportunity to come clean about his moves as well behind his back, but he didn't. But from these conversations, it definitely should have given you all the clues about what was to come next and for which brother. We had Raheem poisoning the men who were at the front with bottles of water, taking one out himself, which would then allow Tommy, Miguel, and DMAC to get the drop on CBI. And that's where all hell broke loose. We saw Tommy, Miguel, DMAC, and the Insane Princes bursting into the church, completely catching CBI off guard, and killing hella CBI men. With DMAC also getting caught in the process by Jenard, yet again, DMAC was shot and he was hurt, but he is going to be fine. There's no way the writers are going to miss an opportunity to have Tommy's two nephews riding with him. But as Jenard did shoot DMAC, he was wide open, which is where Tommy had his opportunity, but this is where Diamond came in and sacrificed himself to save Jenard. After everything that Jenard has done, Diamond was the one to take a bullet and bite the dust in episode 9, which honestly is crazy. We know Jenard was the one who Tommy wanted, but if you go back to the conversation between Jenard and Diamond, he mentioned he knows Jenard sacrificed a lot to keep CBI together. Jenard had a future, he wanted to go to college, but he sacrificed all of that to hold down CBI. And this was Diamond now returning the favor, sacrificing himself to save Jenard. With that being said, Diamond's death will no doubt lead to retaliation, which will also set up another blockbuster episode and finish. Jenard will be completely out of control in episode 10, and I do fear who could actually be caught in the crossfire, because there definitely will be another bloodbath. Hopefully Vic is one of them, to be honest. We've also got the potential return of Tariq St. Patrick as Tommy calls in a favor. It really is finally poised to set up episode 10 to be an all-out war that just simply has to end in Jenard's death. But with that being said, drop all your thoughts down below in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts on Diamond's death and all the other events of Maria wanting to go to Mexico, law enforcement, Seng being rumbled, DMAC killing Marshall. I do think that was also another huge surprise. A lot of talking points post episode 9, that's for sure. But as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.